Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute in this debate. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to start off with a few points that I heard our Honorable Prime Minister make. And the Honorable Prime Minister spoke about lawyers. Now, I want to set the record straight, please, Madam Speaker. It seems as though my colleagues on the other side have a penchant to criticize lawyers when they are standing up for people's rights.
Honorable members. Honorable members. Please continue, ma'am.
Thank you. But Madam Speaker, it is ironic that we hear the Prime Minister today referring to legal advice from lawyers. And I want to say that if you are the Prime Minister for Trinidad and Tobago, in taking that legal advice, have you shared that with the people of Tobago? Have you shared it with Trinidad and Tobago? And Madam Speaker, I know my good friend, the Honorable Attorney General, will come and say there is no duty to share it. But if there is no duty even to share the legal advice that you have you consulted with the people of Trinidad and Tobago? Now, you see, Madam Speaker, I know that it seems that we can say easily there is a certain position that we hold and that we don't have any particular authority because you have divergent views, and this is where we should air our concerns and then have a bill passed that can treat with the situation. But you see, Madam Speaker, in a situation like that, what you are in fact doing is that you would be treating with laws, you will be passing laws in a retrospective manner. And that is something that we have to be very cautious, very wary over. So, Madam Speaker, I want to set a few things in context because I heard the Honorable Prime Minister make reference to certain factual matters. And whilst some of it is correct, I think we have to point out that what you have, and I want to use his own, and this is a correct position, that the assemblymen alone have legal authority. Now, that may be so, but what we have to do is we have to take it in context. And so I want to say that what you have arising following the elections of the 25th of January 2021 is you have assemblymen who have been duly elected to the office of the THA. And this was in pursuance of the THA Act and the elections that have been recently been held. So what took place next is that the assemblymen have been administered their oaths of office. So you have been elected and they have been administered their oaths of office. And therefore they are now the bona fide representatives of the people of Tobago. Their election to the office that they have now taken oath to hold represents the sovereign will of the people of Tobago. And the last time, Madam Speaker, that I checked, Trinidad and Tobago, it's a democracy. And we follow well-established democratic norms and values. And this is something that our Constitution itself declares. And, Madam Speaker, it behoves us that we should give proper credence, I would say full credence, to the will of the people. Now, Madam Speaker, having had the assemblymen take their oath, then the next that came in line was that you have the clerk of the assembly who is vested with certain statutory duties and responsibilities. And they have that responsibility to conduct the proceedings in the assembly, and this is something that the Honorable Prime Minister alluded to, what has taken place. But we must remember that that clerk of the assembly has to properly direct himself or herself in accordance with the law. There is existing law as to what has to take place. So what you have is you have the Tobago House of Assembly standing orders. We can't ignore that. And we have the Tobago House of Assembly standing orders referring to the House of Representatives standing orders. So we should not encourage a situation where you have existing laws. We should not encourage or facilitate a creature of statute, the clerk of the House, shirking his or her responsibility where they have to follow the standing orders and by extension the House of Representatives orders. So, Madam Speaker, I say this and I wanted to, Madam Speaker, to refer immediately to where you have laws are to be construed in accordance with fairness. Now, in dealing with that, Madam Speaker, nobody on this side will mount any position that you cannot pass laws retrospectively. That is a power that you have. But if you are passing law to deal with retrospective matters, you have a duty to act fairly. Fairness must pervade the reasoning. And, Madam Speaker, when you look at, and this is not myself saying this, when you look at the established authors, Benyon on statutory interpretation, you look at parliamentary texts, they will tell you that there is a general dislike in democratic and rule of law driven societies. There is a dislike to have retrospective pieces of legislation. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, in the United States of America, there is an absolute dislike for what they call the ex post facto law. And in fact, in some states of the United States of America, they outright forbid the passage of retrospective legislation. Now, the principle is very simple, no matter which country in the Commonwealth. There's a Latin phrase, lex prospicit, non respisit. The law looks forward and not back. So what we are doing here, respectfully, Madam Speaker, is that you have retrospective legislation going against the principle that legislation by which conduct of mankind is to be regulated, it ought, when introduced for the first time, to deal with future acts and ought not to change the character of past transactions. It ought not to change past events which were carried out upon the fate of the existing laws. So here it is, you are coming now to pass a bill, seeking to pass a bill, make new law, and it is going to delve into treating with persons or citizens of Tobago, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, their rights to vote and to select their member to sit in the assembly. So, Madam Speaker, this is not something that we ought to treat very lightly with. It is a very serious issue that we are dealing with. People's rights have been exercised. The will of the people of Tobago, it has been expressed. I know members on the other side were taken by surprise and they are shocked at the result. But still, we have a duty to ensure that we treat the people of Tobago with utmost respect. And again, I point out that the basis of all that I have said so far is simply a duty to pass law with fairness. It is no more than simple fairness, Madam Speaker. So if we do something today, if Tobagonians did something on any given day, and I'm talking about the 25th of January 2021, the law applying to them, Madam Speaker, should be the law in force of the day, not today's backward adjustment of what took place on the 25th of January. And that is what we are seeing. We are seeing an attempt to adjust the electoral will of Tobago. Now, Madam Speaker, laws must be construed in a particular way. It must be construed, as I said, in accordance with fairness and effectiveness. Madam Speaker, I'm not going to delve into necessarily deep principles of law, but I have mentioned the principle of fairness, and I want to speak about the principle of effectiveness. And when you're dealing with law, whether it be this instant bill today, or you're dealing with any law that is being brought before the Parliament, what you have to look at is where it is possible, any enactment, any enabling provision, any legislative piece of law, if I may say, any legislative pieces that come before the House, you have to construe it in a manner that will give force to the law. It must not be construed in a manner which will be rendered nugatory. So here it is, you are bringing a piece of law which will render the existing law. We have heard mention of Standing Order 92, and then the reference to the House of Representatives Standing Orders. You cannot render those laws nugatory. You have to construe laws in a manner that will give effect to those existing laws. Now, Madam Speaker, not too long ago, there was a particular bill which was brought before this House, the Administration of Justice bill, and in that I know the Honorable Attorney General referred to a case of Attorney General of Turks and Caicos versus Misick, Privy Council Appeal 72 of 2020. And in that particular case, what in that bill, and it's now, is to be passed as law, what the Attorney General sought to do was to refer to that case to say that you can have trials by virtual hearings. Now, the basis for that was that, and why that case went all the way to the Privy Council, was that you had a regulation that was passed in the Turks and Caicos where an ongoing trial would be able to be completed by way of a virtual hearing. So it was a criminal trial, it was on foot, and here it is in the COVID pandemic, they passed a regulation which said that you could have it done virtually. And it was a regulation that was challenged, and what the Privy Council held was that you have to look at the regulation in a particular manner, which, and they sorry?
I hope we're not going back to that past debate and that you're going to quickly tie in what you're going to say to this.
I'm guided. Yes,
okay.
Please, Madam Speaker. What they held was that there is a particular principle of effectiveness. And so the judgment said of relevance, and this was the crux of why they held up a regulation. So although there was debate about existing law, and this was just a mere regulation, what you have is that they were referring to this regulation. Some lawyers tend to call it subsidiary legislation. The principle of effectiveness applied, and therefore it says, where possible, an enactment will be construed so that its provisions are given force and effect rather than rendered nugatory. So if we take that in the present context, what you do have is you have the standing orders that is applicable to the THA, the Tobago House of Assembly, and that in itself, you cannot, that is existing law. You have to construe that existing law in a manner that will give effect to the regulation and the THA Act itself. So, Madam Speaker, again, I have spoken about fairness and the principle of effectiveness. Now, what this does is that it means that you can have the appointment of the presiding officer. When you're looking at the laws, it should be interpreted in a manner which facilitates. Remember, we just had an election, THA elections in Tobago. So rather than destroy the rights of so many thousands of Tobagoans, we should interpret the law, construe the law that will facilitate rather than prohibit the appointment of a presiding officer. And that is what we are duty-bound to do. So we on this side, we would want to place on record that in debating this particular bill that is before the House, that we want to give proper effect. As a responsible opposition, yes, we are led by Member for Siparia, and she has rightly put out in the public domain, even before this bill was brought before the House, she put out correctly what the position was as a matter of law. So Member for Siparia did not wait for legal advice. She advised as a senior counsel that we have to give force to rights. And I know we'll hear some persons come in and say, oh, well, all you on that side don't have moral authority to talk about Tobago. We have every moral authority when rights are being trampled upon in Tobago by virtue of not giving effect to the standing orders. and consequently adopting the House of Representative orders, we have every moral authority to speak on this occasion and to give some voice to the people of Tobago. I would like to know that you now have a so-called 6 of some, half a dozen of the other, but you have this tie, and therefore has any consultation been held with anybody at all in terms of whether or not you can have this situation resolved? So that is even outside the principles of law that I'm referring to. Now, Madam Speaker, we have spoken about Standing Order 92, and this, of course, it provides, I am saying it provides the recourse to a situation like this. And I want to say that when we look at the Tobago House of Assembly Act, it could not, notwithstanding that the number 12 is there, it could not have been the intention. We cannot say that the collective will of the Parliament, that the intention of the framers of that act was to contrive a scenario where the Assembly would be rendered in an inoperative state simply because you have a tie. And that is why it is even critical to look at the Standing Orders 92, and as I say, by extension, the House of Representatives order, Standing Orders. So, Madam Speaker, this is what we have to give effect to. This is the law as it presently stands. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to go a little bit further in terms of when we look at what has been put out in the public domain. It is incumbent on us that we go back a little bit in history, and we have to look at when you had particular debates on reports being brought before this House. There were certain reports to approve the Election and Boundaries Commission's reports. And Madam Speaker, what you have is, for example, the 11th report of the Elections and Boundaries Commission on the boundaries of the electoral districts in the electoral area of Tobago, and this is the 29th of September 2016. And what it says, I will just make reference. I know there are other persons to come after and they can correct the record if I'm wrong, but I am reading clearly that the EBC said in 2016 that the Commission considers that no adjustment is necessary to the boundaries of the electoral districts in the electoral area of Tobago. And this is where we had the 12, and I want to put it on record as well that subsequent to that report of 2016, you also have a report which came in 2020. And that 12th report, Madam Speaker, I apologize, I can't find my copy, but I do know that the 12th report, yes, 8th of September 2020, again it said, and it spoke about the 12 electoral districts, and they spoke about the highest electorate, the lowest electorate, the percentage differential between highest and lowest, and they used their formula. This is not unknown, they haven't contrived this for the first time. And so what it said was that the Commission considers that no adjustment is necessary to the existing boundaries of the electoral districts. So here it is, you have an independent body set up under the Constitution, set up according to our laws, and they are the ones who have the duty to ensure that people are properly represented. They have a duty to ensure that you don't have over-representation, so you don't have 10 persons being represented by an assemblyman. You have a particular amount, and they have determined, according to the law, that the electoral district, is properly defined. The boundaries, there's no need to adjust it, and the people are getting proper representation. Why is it that we are coming now to insert the number 15 for electoral districts? How do we contrive the number 15 when we are talking about changing the electoral districts from 12 to 15? So, Madam Speaker, my simple point on that is that I don't know if it is we have to go back to the polls in Tobago, as is being suggested with this bill. Who is to say that a third force will not come forward, and then you have 5, 5, 5? That is a possibility. So, Madam Speaker, That is something that if it doesn't happen immediately, it is very possible it can happen in the future. So I'm not being facetious by suggesting just how we didn't think that you would end up with a 6-6 position. You can end up with 3 parties getting involved, or even more, but 3 parties each acquiring 5 electoral districts, and therefore you have equally drawn assemblymen. So what would happen in a position like that, Madam Speaker? So I raised that. I know my colleagues who will come after will go a little bit more in depth in it. But how do you arrive with a bill with a number 15, and you're saying that that will cure the problem of a tie, when in truth and in fact, sometime in the future, you can have the same tie that you're trying to prevent? So, Madam Speaker, these are some of the matters which I wanted to raise, and I know that if it is you are representing the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we have heard many prominent persons coming out of Tobago, prominent persons out of Trinidad, all of us sharing one love, all of us concerned about the fate of the THA and the future fate of Tobago, and therefore they have put forward their own suggestions. One issue that underpins all of the suggestions being put forward is that there has been absolutely no consultation with the people of Tobago. Now, Madam Speaker, I know reference has been made to the Tobago Self-Governance Bill, which is presently before the JSC. All I would say is that insofar as I'm hearing that out of consultations that went before that JSC, so I accept that there were consultations, persons would have put forward certain views, and it went before the JSC. What is the present position of the JSC? It is simply that whatever has come forward and is deliberated upon, it will return for consultation to the people of Tobago and Trinidad. That is the present position of the JSC. So to say that, arising out of that, and we can take that singular item out of the bill, and that is before the JSC, it still has to go back. That is an accepted position. Whatever the JSC determines, there's an understanding and there's a clear position that it is going back for consultation for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So I would not hold on to the fact that somebody would have said there that they are looking at increasing the electoral districts and the assemblymen to the number 15. So, Madam Speaker, we on the side, our position is very clear. We are saying that there is existing law, persons' rights have crystallized under the existing law, namely the assemblymen, the citizens of Tobago. They have exercised their franchise, and they have voted, and their will has been reflected. There is law to give further expression to that, where you have the 6-6 situation, and therefore there is absolutely no need to have this particular bill passed before the Parliament. Now, Madam Speaker, one of the concerns, I want to take it out of the law and deal with it squarely. We have to understand, I don't know, in a situation where you have 6-6, as we have now, that people are going to be relaxed, more relaxed than they were in the last THA elections. And what you're going to have is you're going to have an increased campaigning that will take place, because you will have parties wanting to outdo the other, and that is natural. This is what the politics of our Twin Island Republic, entails. You're going to have some seriously active campaigning, and what is going to take place? Can Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago, withstand the kind of resources and the kind of energies that go into these things, particularly having regard to the fact that we're in a pandemic? Why are we putting our people through that kind of experience when they have done it and they are entitled to? We are not saying no, they are entitled to, and they exercise their franchise, and it has found its will in the THA. All that needs to be done now is to exercise the procedures that obtained in the THA. So, Madam Speaker, I say this in the context of, we are looking at it from a practical point of view. So I have attempted to give a position in law. I have attempted to give a position in terms of how you interpret purposefully the fact that you have legislation, existing legislation. I've also tried as best as possible to make reference to the fact that there is authority for what we are saying. So I have put forward some of the authorities without trying to delve too deep into case law. And the simple point that remains to be made is that if it is you have concern for the people of Tobago, I think the starting point is to ensure that their will, which they exercised in the 25th of January 2021, that it finds its way. Let the people of Tobago decide. Madam Speaker, it is, and I don't think we should take things lightly when we hear positions being put forward that why don't you allow the existing law to take course and then expedite the self-governance bill. That is a valid position. That is an absolutely valid position, that you can have expediting of the Tobago self-governance bill, which is presently before the JSC, and therefore the people of Tobago will benefit from that. So, Madam Speaker, I want to say that in parting, that what we also had was that we have had certain debates in the past where you had the Election and Boundaries Commission, Local Government and THA Validation Number 2 bill. I just make passing reference to this. And I don't ascribe any kind of aspersion, I certainly do not. But by way of this bill, and there's Hansard of the 15th of October 2010, our Honorable Prime Minister, then leader of the opposition, would have referred to the fact that there was no need to change the electoral boundaries to have increased numbers of electoral districts, and squarely putting it that if it had to be done, really that suggestion must come from the Election and Boundaries Commission. So what we are seeing is we now have a totally 360 position being taken. And my colleagues to come after will make reference to other persons who also joined in different debates when we had validation bills. Well, that one was the validation bill, but when we had all other EBC reports coming before the House, that there's a 360 turn being taken at this time. Now, Madam Speaker, in conclusion, Madam Speaker, we on this side, we maintain that we will support good law. Good law means that it will give proper representation and it will ensure that people's rights are protected. In this particular instance, Madam Speaker, I am saying that it leaves a lot to be desired when people have exercised their franchise. You have rights crystallizing, namely the assemblymen and other persons, they have accrued rights, that you now seeking to pass a law here which will act retrospectively to take away those rights. Madam Speaker, that cannot be in the best interest of the people of Tobago. Madam Speaker, I saw a social media clip where I now see that the opposing, I want to say the successful party, the PDP, in this last election that we are referring to, that they have now served pre-action protocol letter on the clerk of the House. This is not something that we really want to have a fight over at this time or at any time. So I am saying give way to the will of the people of Tobago, give way to the will of the law, and let us move forward. There is no business in passing this particular piece of legislation. Madam Speaker, I thank you very much.